Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Summer. I am a medical graduate and an embryologist with over 13 years of work experience. I am now currently working as a fertility coach, and today we are going to talk about egg freezing. One of the most common questions I get asked is, should I freeze my eggs? So if you're in your 20s, 30s, focus on career, just unsure if you want to have kids at all, in a relationship or single, I think every female should know about egg freezing. Let's dive into egg freezing, and hopefully by the end you should feel a bit more clear whether or not you should be freezing your eggs. So egg freezing would be considered a relatively new procedure. So in 2012, the ASRM, which is the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, declared egg freezing as no longer an experimental procedure, but it was actually a normal procedure. It was like a standard procedure that would be offered into labs without the context of it being experimental. Before that, mostly it was done for experimental reasons or for people undergoing chemotherapy, and it was kind of like a last resort for them to preserve fertility before undergoing treatment. After ASRM's announcement, a lot of labs started offering egg freezing. So first of all, we're going to discuss what exactly is egg freezing. So egg freezing, or the scientific term oocyte cryopreservation, is basically just vitrifying your egg cells after an egg collection and freezing them for use later on in the future. The main idea is your fertility is frozen or cryopreserved in time. So for example, if you're 28, which would be an amazing age to freeze your eggs, and you froze your eggs and then you decide to use them when you're 39 or 40, when you use the eggs that you produce at 28, your chances of success are like that of a 28-year-old rather than that who is 39, 40. Fertility tends to rapidly decline after 35. I'm going to pop in a chart here. So basically, your egg quality starts to actually decline quite early on, around 27 years old, but it's a slow decline. Then after 35 and 36, it does tend to rapidly drop. And then by the time you reach 40, it drops even more. So the whole idea behind oocyte cryopreservation, or egg freezing, is to preserve your fertility if you do freeze your eggs at a younger age, and then when you use them at an older age, you have the same success rates that you would have had at the age that you froze your eggs in. So who would be the prime candidates for egg freezing? So if someone's in their 20s or 30s and they're very career driven and they know that they're not going to have time to have kids in the next 5-10 years, I would strongly recommend egg freezing. If you do want to have kids, but maybe you haven't found a suitable partner, it could be also an option worth exploring. If you are unsure about having kids, like you're thinking, I actually don't think I want to have kids, I'd strongly recommend freezing eggs, because we do see in clinics a lot of people who tend to come in at a later age, like late 30s, early 40s, who previously didn't want to have kids, but then they changed their mind as they got older, and then they find it quite difficult because their egg quality isn't as good as it could have been 10 years ago. I think for egg freezing, a lot of people regret not freezing their eggs, but nobody ever regrets freezing their eggs, because at the end of the day, you don't have to use them. Obviously, those who are undergoing treatment like chemotherapy and haven't even started a family, egg freezing would be strongly recommended. So after treatment, they would have eggs that have not been affected by chemotherapy or radiation, and that would provide a better success rate for them to produce their own family. People who have tested their AMH levels and discovered that they have low AMH levels for their age would also be strongly recommended to freeze their eggs. I will do another video about AMH. So basically, AMH stands for anti-Müllerian hormone, and it's an indicator of how many eggs are left in reserve in your body. It's not an indicator of quality. So you can have a low AMH and have good quality eggs. But if you do have AMH for your age, AMH does not improve. If anyone tells you take this supplement to increase your AMH, AMH does not improve. So it only goes down with time. So if you do have low AMH, it would be strongly recommended that you freeze your eggs. So people who do want to delay their career, people who have not met the right partner, people who have low AMH or undergoing medical treatment, people who are unsure if they actually want to have kids in the future, they would be people who would be advised to really look into egg freezing. If you are thinking that might be me, should I freeze my eggs? Keep watching because I'm going to explain what to expect when it comes to egg freezing in just a moment. How does the egg process work? So first of all, you would go to your lab and just tell them you want to freeze your eggs. Usually you'd have to do a couple of blood tests. They probably see you on the second day of your period, draw some blood and just kind of do a whole panel of tests that anyone who is going to do egg freezing has to undergo. And then they would tell you to start at the next cycle or possibly that cycle depending on the time constraints that you have. You start taking injections. Most of them are in your belly, which last for 10 to 14 days depending on the dose that you're giving and how your body responds to the medication. How they measure how your body responds to the medication, it can be by blood tests and also by transvaginal ultrasound, which is just an ultrasound to see how many eggs your body is producing and how it's responding to all the medication that you're taking. When the follicles reach a certain size, they give you what is known as a trigger injection. So the trigger injection, it's very, very important. They will give you a specific time because the time you take this injection depends on the time that your eggs will be retrieved. So it has to be exactly around 36 hours before egg collection. So this is like the most important injection. Try not to miss this shot or mess up the times because it really does impact the egg quality at egg retrieval. So they give you a trigger shot 36 hours before the scheduled time of the egg collection. You take it the next day, you don't take any medication, and then the following day, the day after, like 2 days after the trigger injection, you go in to get your eggs retrieved. So on the day of egg collection, you're sedated and a needle is inserted into your vagina attached to a transvaginal ultrasound probe. And then the doctor looks at the ultrasound machine and he uses this needle to suck out all of the follicles, which contain eggs, and he puts it in a test tube. And then this test tube is sent to the lab where someone like me would look at it underneath a microscope and then collect all the eggs and leave it in a dish to settle for around 2 to 3 hours. And after that, after a few hours, the embryologist will do something called denudation, which is basically remove the cumulus cells from the eggs and then assess the maturity of the eggs. So eggs have 3 levels of maturity. There is metaphase 2, which is a mature egg, metaphase 1, which is the step before metaphase 2, so they're immature, and then GV, which is germinal vesicle, which is really immature. So only the metaphase 2 or the M2 eggs are frozen. It's very common when anyone undergoes an egg collection for the embryologist or doctor to say something like, we collected 20 eggs, 3 were immature, 17 were good to go, good to freeze basically. The eggs are frozen the same day they are collected. And they stay vitrified for years. They can stay frozen for up to 100 years. And that's basically the whole process of egg collection in a nutshell. It usually takes around 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how your body responds and the protocol you're on and the medication you're taking. So another very common question when it comes to egg freezing is, how many eggs do I need to freeze? It depends on your egg quality and your age. The two are usually related, but not always. Sometimes you have people in their late 30s who produce good eggs, and sometimes you have people in their late 20s who don't produce good quality eggs. But generally speaking, I will divide it into age categories because it just makes more sense and it's more applicable to the general public. So if you're under 35, I would say 10 to 15 eggs would give you a good chance of a live birth. If you are between the age of 35 to 37, I would say 15 to 20 eggs would give you a better chance of a live birth. If you're between 38 and 40 years of age, I would say 20 to 30 eggs might be needed because usually this age group tends to have a lower success rate. The reason why you need such a high number of eggs is because eggs are very, very fragile. If you ever Google image egg underneath a high def microscope, they're arrested basically in meiosis, so they have a meiotic spindle. And this meiotic spindle is very, very sensitive to freezing and thawing, which is why it's very common for people to do 2, maybe 3 rounds of egg freezing just to ensure they have a good number. Also, humans, they're not super breeders, like we're not rabbits. We don't tend to produce a lot of offspring. So we usually only have 1 child per pregnancy. So it might be worth looking into doing 1, maybe 2 rounds of egg freezing if the numbers you are producing are on the lower side. So the next question you might ask is, what are egg freezing success rates? There's a large variation of how many eggs survive thawing. So 50 to 95% of eggs survive thawing. And I think this is because there's so many different variables at play here. First of all, your egg quality plays a big role in it. Second of all, the embryologist who is actually thawing your eggs and the freezing or thawing protocol that the lab uses plays a major role as well. It also depends on the lab you're using. Some labs are very, very experienced in egg freezing and thawing, others not so much because they don't get a high rate of egg freezing. So that also plays a role. A good lab would probably have up to 95% success rate, especially if the eggs are good quality. As I've said, there is a variation. Around 30 to 70% actually successfully fertilize. So not all eggs fertilize as well. So as you can see, every step of the way, the numbers tend to drop, which is why higher numbers of eggs frozen have better success rates. And then if you do have a good quality embryo for transfer, the success rate would be around 30 to 50% chance of success, depending on the quality of the embryo and the quality of the eggs at the time they were frozen. It can be a bit frustrating because egg freezing does not guarantee that you will have a baby at the end of the day, but at the same time, it's better than having nothing to use if you find yourself in your mid-40s and you're trying to do an IVF cycle. So egg freezing does not guarantee that you will have a baby at the end of the day, but it does improve your chances, especially if you're trying to have your own biological child later on in life. So I'm quickly going to draw up a list of the pros and cons of egg freezing, and this might help you make a decision to see if egg freezing is for you. So the list of pros would be it does extend your fertility window. Like I've said, it does give you the same chance of success you would have had when you froze your eggs at a younger age than you would using your own eggs at an older age. It can drastically reduce the pressure to rush into a pregnancy, especially if you haven't found the right partner, you're in a very high demanding job, or maybe you're just not sure if you actually do want to have kids yet. It's very good for medical conditions that can affect fertility, like chemotherapy. Another pro would be nobody ever regrets freezing their eggs, but people always regret not freezing their eggs. So it's something to consider. Just, it might give you peace of mind. The major disadvantage of freezing your eggs would be cost. So the cost really varies depending where you get it done. In Ireland, where I worked, it would cost you around 5 to 6,000 euro to freeze your egg. Usually if someone has a medical card or a drug payment scheme card, the medication is capped at 80 euro. So that's why it would be quite low. But if you're in a different country where the lab would take 5 to 6,000 euro and then you had to pay for your own medication, the total cost might reach up around 8,000 to maybe 10,000 euro, which is quite high, especially given that most people will need maybe 2 or even 3 rounds of egg freezing to produce a good number of eggs. Another disadvantage would be not all eggs survive thawing, and it doesn't give you 100% chance that you will have a baby. It will facilitate improved success rates in the future, but it does not guarantee a baby. It also takes time out of your work calendar. So you will need to take time off to go see your doctor for your scan appointments before the egg collection. You will definitely need to take the day of the egg collection off. And some people might have to take an extra day or 2 off afterwards if they're feeling a little bit bloated or cramped after the egg collection. So now we're going to talk about what to consider if you are thinking about freezing your eggs. I would say the first thing would be age. So the sooner you freeze your eggs, the better. If you're in your 20s and you're unsure, I would highly recommend you freeze your eggs. I think freezing your eggs in your 20s would probably be the best thing ever, but sadly, nobody really freezes their eggs in their 20s because they don't even think about having children in their 20s, and they're just assuming it will happen for them naturally in the next few years. If you are in your 20s and you do want to freeze your eggs, I would say cost would be a major factor because you're not really at a stage in your life where you have the disposable income to spend maybe 5 to 10 grand on egg freezing. But one way to get over that would maybe to discuss it with your friends and family, and people can kind of chip in and help you over Christmas or your birthday and give you money instead of gifts to help you kind of save to do egg freezing. Another thing to consider would be clinic success rates. So I will do another video on how to know if an IVF clinic is good or not. But basically, if they're well versed in egg freezing, they have a high rate of egg freezing. Usually the people working there will know how to successfully freeze and thaw eggs without creating unnecessary damage and losing eggs along the way. Another thing to consider as well, if you are going to freeze your eggs and you do have to use them in the future, you will have to go through IVF cycles, meaning that the eggs frozen will undergo ICSI, which means they will be injected with sperm. The reason being is when you do freeze eggs, it has a little shell outside called the zona pellucida. The zona pellucida tends to harden with freezing, so IVF in the traditional sense would not work. So the egg has to be physically penetrated with the sperm for it to be fertilized, and then if it successfully forms a good quality embryo, you would have to do a transfer and then wait to see if you're pregnant or not. So you will have to do an IVF cycle if you end up doing it, which is also quite stressful. So I hope I have shed some light on egg freezing. If anyone has any questions, just comment or DM me. I'd be more than happy to talk or discuss about your egg freezing options. And like and subscribe if you like this video, and hopefully I'll be posting more videos soon. Bye.